All right, we're going to go over the installation of a 9100 SXT. That's a Fleck valve built for the dual tank system. And so that's the face of the valve. And we're just going to cover what comes with a unit here at the very beginning here. So you're going to get, that's obviously the valve, the head portion there. It's got the electrical cable out back, a meter cable here plugged into the meter. And then we have, you'll have some small fittings here. There's a brass compression fitting, a ferrule fitting here, and a little stabilizer for the brine tube. And you also get this little screen here, and we just suggest that you just throw that away. You don't need that, and we'll mention that again later, but there's a screen internally that gets backwashed with the unit. So you do not need this screen, so you can just go ahead and throw that away. So those three fittings for the brine line. And then this is the drain line. We're going to show how to connect all these, but just want to go over what you should have in your package there. So that's the drain line. And then you'll also get, this is the yoke and the bypass here. So that's the yoke. You'll get that 3/4 inch or 1 inch with the bypass. And you'll get the crossover tubes to connect two tanks for the resin there. And then the satellite head portion that'll all connect the two tubes to the valve. In order to do all of that, we use these clips and screws here. So you should have several of those, and we'll show you how that all connects. You also have another batch of fittings with the safety tank, the safety float. In the brine tank. So this is what the safety float looks like. It's got a small pickup there at the bottom, bell-shaped float, and we'll show you how that connects, obviously. And we also have the brine well. That's where the safety float goes inside the brine tank. And then in there you have an overflow elbow and a cap for the brine well. And you get a 3/8 tube to connect the valve portion to the safety float as well. So those are all parts that come with a 9100 SXT. There are a few things that you'll want to have before you start to do the installation process. Some of these are listed here. You know, we got the pliers, some general hand tools, a screwdriver, and then we have a little nut driver here to help us. You also need to purchase your own drain line. Everybody's drains are different. So you can never figure out how much to send. So just buy that locally. We suggest anything that's kind of flexible, but it's 1/2 inch in diameter. So that's 1/2 inch ID drain line there. And we recommend that with like a hose clamp, just like that one there. But you'll need to get that. Also some sort of lubrication. We recommend cooking oil or something like that, just for potable water. You'll need some of that to grease all the O-rings, and some plumber's tape. And so those are all the things that that you'll need before you start the process of installing your 9100 SXT.
So you may be missing a box, or something may be missing. You know, these ship in multiple boxes, usually a couple, sometimes more. But if you take the tracking number we sent you in, just go to the UPS site, or wherever you purchased it, wherever it shipped from, whichever company. Typically we ship UPS, so you would just track it there. It's going to show, you know, in this case, on vehicle for delivery. If you scroll down here, you'll notice packages in the shipment too. So you'll click on that, and that will give you the tracking for both boxes. So one may be on the vehicle for delivery, one down here may say delivered. So that's how you'll know, you know, if you have one still on the way. Sometimes the UPS shipping warehouses, they'll get on different trucks, so sometimes one will arrive the next day or a couple days, but you'll be able to track it this way. Okay, now we're going to go over putting the bypass on the softener. Connects to the meter back here, connecting the yoke to the bypass here. You'll notice there's some O-rings here, so we're just going to go ahead and ask that you lubricate those up. You know, standard cooking oil works great, or anything that's okay for potable water works great. So just lubricate those up real good and make installing the bypass and the yoke much easier. So we're going to attach the bypass, this part right here, onto the meter, so we'll want to lubricate that as well. To get this part done, I'm going to have to take this cover off. There's a couple of screws here that will move. This cover slides off real easily there. And we'll have to access one of the screws. We actually have to go kind of through the valve to tighten up there. So we're just going to start with this bypass. These little handy dandy clips hold everything in place. You'll notice there'll be a lot of play up and down with the bypass and the yoke. It's engineered that way. The O-rings are deep set, so don't be alarmed when there's play up and down. That's normal. It should be that way. The main thing with these clips that screw in and hold everything together is that when we do tighten these screws up, we don't want to over tighten those screws. Remember, the O-rings will hold the water back, not the screws. So we've had people actually taking those screws so far in that they punch right through the plastic and cause a leak. So over tightening could actually cause a leak. So just snug is great. So you notice this hole we went through here to access the cover. There's a clip back there. So we're going to go ahead and slide the bypass on here. That just pushes on like so. He's kind of wiggle it back and forth, and then we'll show you how this clip, one on each side, goes into place. Once again, we can't stress enough that we don't want to over tighten these screws. We don't want to punch right through that plastic. So just snug with your screwdriver or nut driver there is good enough. And then, like we said, the other one on the other side, we have to access. That was a little bit tricky, but once you get it in there, you know it's in there forever. You don't have to do it again. You've got this little hole right there. That's how you access that screw. The other clip goes in like so, and the screw goes in through there. Bypass secure. Right now the bypass is in the service position. Actually, you would want these closed in the bypass position where they point towards each other. They just turn by hand there pretty easily. So during installation, we want them in this position. Later on, we'll discuss that, putting it in the service position. But next, we'll want to throw the yoke on here. That's what we actually tie our plumbing into. So that's going to go on just like the bypass, lube up those O-rings. We just want to be sure not to over tighten the screws again. There's going to be two sets of screws with your system. You'll have the shorter screws that we'll use later to connect the two tanks. But these clips here on the bypass and yoke will use the two longer screws. And just snug. Alright, now that we got that nice and snug, we're going to go ahead and throw the drain elbow on. It's going to go up here on the top. You want to put one or two wraps on that. If you don't, it will leak when it backwashes. So it's plastic on plastic again. We don't want to muscle any of this stuff. So once again, just snug that up. You don't want to put a huge wrench on it. You can certainly put a wrench on it and snug it up, but just don't go too crazy tightening that up. And definitely no pipe dope on that. Just the Teflon tape will suffice. Pipe dope can actually crack the valve, so just the pipe tape is what we recommend there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just put the cover back on for now, just using these two thumb screws that hold that in place. And then we're going to show how these go on the tanks and how we connect the two tanks together with the crossover tubes. All right, so now we're going to discuss the mineral tank portion of the video here. Most of the units, 64,000 grain or smaller, typically ship loaded with the resin in the tank. So that part is already done for you actually. So your tank's going to have a little bit of weight to it. A lot of times it will actually ship inside of the salt tank. So don't be sure to double check your box there if you're missing a salt tank. And we'll have this nifty little cap on here for shipping, so we'll go ahead and remove that off of there for you. You'll notice you've got a riser tube in there. That's the pipe down the middle of the tank that our valve is actually going to sit onto and hand tighten onto the tank. Okay, so if you have a softener, 80,000 grains or bigger, more than likely it's not going to ship loaded. It's too big. So we send this handy dandy funnel width, which you'll simply place on the tank. You'll see a little tube called the riser tube that runs down the middle of the tank. You're going to want to put tape on top of it before you pour or scoop the resin into the tank. I prefer to scoop it, think it's a little bit easier. we send the proper amount of resin width. You'll notice it doesn't fill the tank. There's something called freeboard, usually about half or 2/3 up the tank. It's a space the resin needs to expand during backwash. So the tank should not and will not fill all the way up with resin. Once you're done, remove the funnel, the tape, back off the riser tube, and then you can hand tighten the valve back onto. Okay, we're going to show you how to put the main valve on, the main tank here. So the key is to lubricate the O-ring underneath the valve. You'll notice there's a big O-ring under there. Just make sure to lubricate that guy. And there's an O-ring internally you want to lubricate as well. No Teflon tape, no pipe dope. Just center the riser tube into the valve and then just hand tighten the valve on. Just barely snug. The mistake that people tend to make is once they get it tight, they want to really muscle it, and that can crack the valve. The O-ring will hold the water back, so just hand tight is good enough, and don't force it. Don't put any tools on it. Don't really muscle it. Just snug is good, and no tighter than that. We're going to want to do the same thing with the satellite valve as well. You'll notice that on the other tank here. So just line it up with the tube in the middle, no Teflon tape there, and then just hand tighten that one on as well. All right, so now we're going to connect our connector tubes here, our crossover tubes, to connect each tank. So we just want to make sure each O-ring is properly lubed. This is going to clip together just like the bypass, but we're going to use the smaller screws. The key here again is just to snug it up, don't over tighten it, and so we're just going to show you how these each go on, just like the bypass before. And just going to go ahead and just snug it up. You just don't want to get it where it punches all the way through the plastic. So snug is good. The O-ring will hold back the water. Just like with the bypass, this part, you're going to see that little hole back there. We can see a little bit of daylight there. That's where you're going to connect the other clip and get your screwdriver through to tighten that one up. But this is how it should look when everything's all connected here. And we're going to go ahead to the action. All right, next we're going to go ahead and hook the brine line to the control valve and connect that to the brine tank. The great part about the safety floats we include is a quick connect fitting. You can simply just push the brine line right into the brine tank and just push it in, give it a good tug, make sure it's secure. That part, now we're just going to discuss how to connect the brine line. That's a 3/8" tubing that came with. We've got a few fittings here. We're not going to use the screen. Like we said, there's an internal screen that gets backwashed with it. But these other 3 fittings we're going to show, we're going to want to put them on just like so. Compression fitting, ferrule fitting with the pointy end towards the valve, fatter end towards the compression fitting. We've got this insert that goes in there. You do not need any Teflon tape. It is a compression fitting. So we're going to show you that goes on the valve right here. And you're going to want to snug this up with a wrench once you get it on here. And that's where the brine line connects here, and we'll show you in the next step where that connects. Quick connect fitting on the actual brine tank itself. All right, so now we're going to want to connect our plumbing lines. We elected just to use these flexible hoses. We like those. So
you can definitely use Teflon tape on here or pipe dope. We usually use Teflon tape. These flexible hoses are nice because they have rubber gaskets in there, but you can use PEX, PVC, copper, whatever, you know, just make sure you follow your local plumbing codes there. So the key here is the inlet and outlet. So this is going out to the home, arrow pointing out, and then we've got this arrow, hard to see, pointing in here toward the softener. So this would be the water coming in from the city or in from the well, and this arrow pointing out here would be the one you want to be going back to the home. So once that's all secure, you can go ahead and open your bypass. You want to open your inlet first, just nice and slow there. Just a little bit of time. You don't want to hit it with too much force, and then you can go ahead and open your outlet nice and slow. You'll hear it filling up at that point, and then we're ready to go ahead and plug the unit in, and we're going to go through the programming settings with you next. Okay, now we're ready to program the unit. To get into master programming, you have to set the current time of day to 12:01 p.m. So when the time of day flashes up, we're not setting the time of day. We're not showing you how to set the time of day here, even though this kind of does show you that. The essential part is here, to go into master programming, we got to be on 12:01 p.m. Otherwise, you're not going to go into master programming. So be sure you set it to 12:01 p.m. Then just barely tap the recycle button, and then we want to hold the up and the down arrows at the same time for 10 seconds until we get into programming here. And you should see DF gal. We're going to go ahead and tap this diamond button. Most of the stuff here is going to be set for you. The first thing we're really going to be changing is the capacity, which is going to be default at C-24. So if you have a 32,000 grain softener, for instance, you'd want to raise this to 32. Even, you know, it's per tank, so 32,000 per tank. If you're at 40,000, you'd want to set it per tank. You'd want to set it on 40. If you're at 48,000 grains per tank, you'd set this at 48, and so on and so forth. And then we want to go ahead and hit the diamond button again. This is where you set your hardness. Set this for your hardness in grains per gallon. Any iron you have, be sure to set to an additional 5 to the hardness for each part of iron you have. If you have a lot of iron, be sure to call us if you bought a unit from A Plus Water LLC. We'd like to go through a few of the other settings. We'd like to get it dialed in a little bit better with you. Toll free at 1-877-477-5452. We're going to go ahead and skip ahead to the brine fill. That's the only other real setting we need to change here. So if you have a Mighty Max Mini twin tank, you're going to want to set that brine fill to 2. If you have a 16,000 grain per tank, you would set that to 3. A 24,000 grain per tank, you would set that to 5. A 32,000 grain per tank to 6. A 40,000 grain per tank to 8. A 48,000 grain per tank to 10. A 64,000 grain per tank, there's a different flow control button, so we're going to teak that down to 6. At 80,000 grain per tank, we would teak that up to 8. A 96,000 grain per tank to 10. And then go ahead and tap that diamond button until we get back to the current time of day. And then it's going to flash between your gallons. It's going to flash to which tank it's currently using, and then it's going to flash to the time of day. So it's always going to be flashing back. So right now we're on tank 2. You may be on tank 1. And when the time of day flashes up there, let's say it's 1 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and just hold that up button in to go to 1 o'clock. Just an example. Just set that to whatever your current time of day is. And then once you get to 1 o'clock, or whatever your time is there, go ahead and just tap that diamond button and you're in business. So it's going to flash between the time, the tank you're currently on, and then your gallons before the next backlog. And this is where you attach the 1/2-inch ID drain tube. We use the poly tubing here ourselves with the C-clamp. So you want to go ahead and push that on there onto the barbed fitting, and then snug up that clamp so it doesn't come off, and make sure that runs to a drain at least 1.5 inches. Okay, so we're going to want to run that drain over. It can go up and over, believe it or not, and go up 5 feet above the unit as far as 25 feet over and back down again. We want it going into at least 1.5 inches drain. We do want an air gap, so we don't want this
shoved down in there, you definitely want a gap between the drain and the drain line. That way we can prevent any backflow.
All right, now that we have everything hooked up, the drain line, the brine line to the salt tank, everything hooked up here. Before we put this cover on, we want to do a manual regeneration. You just hold the cycle or the diamond button down for about 5 seconds. You hold that button in, it triggers a manual regeneration. That process takes about an hour and a half. And the reason why we ask you to do that is just to make sure there's no leaks in any of the fittings that you have, just to verify everything is hooked up correctly. And then once it's through that, or once you start that regeneration, then of course you can put the cover back on. And then remember to keep at least 1 bag of salt in the bottom of the salt tank. You can fill it up. That's up to you how much you want to put in there, but at least 1 bag of salt in the salt tank. And then again, if you've bought from us A+ Water, we would love to help you with any questions along the way. So please feel free to call us. Again, if you bought from us here at A+ Water, call us toll free at 877-477-5452. That's 877-477-5452. And of course, we'd love to help you, but enjoy your new softener.